Hey everybody, today I want to talk about the Cold Steel SRK. This knife is literally perfect and has replaced the Kobun as my favorite knife of all time. This knife will keep you alive in many ways. So let's take a look at it. Where do I begin on this amazing knife? I mean, just look at this thing. This knife will do everything, and I think that I'm not going to find a better knife ever. It's the perfect blade length, 6 inches. It's big enough to get the job done, to deal a knockout punch, while still being small and relatively light. Not too light, though. It's got some mass to it, which helps in a defensive situation. And the sheath is... well, it's just plastic, but it works, so I have no complaints. I haven't seen any shavings or anything. It holds it and, keeps water off. What the heck else is it supposed to do? That's fine. So I have no complaints about the sheath. It's also fully grippable in the sheath with your thumb in the right spot. Overall length is 10.8 inches, which I found for my system is the perfect size. I would not want it any bigger. Its sister knife, the Recon Tanto, is a little bit too big. The blade's too long on that one. So this is the perfect size for me. I'm very picky about that in my systems. The steel is this amazing VG1 stainless steel. It is, I believe it's 2 Rockwell harder than AUS 8, and I consider this a premium steel. I guess there is probably one step up with Sanmai 3, but VG1 for me is plenty premium. I love it. It's extremely sharp. The handle is amazing. This Crayex rubber that it has is so grippy, and look at that massive index guard. Your finger is not going anywhere on that index guard, and it's got a heavy, feel in your hand, right? It's got mass, and it's not going anywhere. The country of origin, this one's from Japan. Of course, it was designed by Cold Steel in the United States, but this is a Japanese steel, and the blade itself was manufactured in Japan. And it is more expensive than some of Cold Steel's lesser offerings, but it's still very reasonably priced. At the time of this video, you can get it usually around 80 or 90 bucks, depending on where you look. And you can see it's relatively thick. The spine is not crazy thick, but it's got some mass to it, right? It's an 8.8 ounce blade, and it's just big enough and heavy enough to deal a knockout blow in a defensive situation. And of course, with the clip point like that, it can do a ton of utility tasks. I was testing this thing out on some wood, and it just sliced the bark right off the wood like a hot knife through butter. It was nothing. And you can see how big it is in hand. It's a big blade. It's not the biggest. It's kind of an interesting philosophy they have with this, because it is a somewhat hefty knife, but in a relatively small package. I kind of feel like this is the baseline for what you could consider a combat knife, right? Like, this is a fighting knife that can also do utility. The Recon Tanto version, with the slightly longer blade and the Tanto tip, is more for fighting. This is maybe more for utility, but I see this in a defensive role working out just fine. That clip point really acute. Look at that. So on a thrust would absolutely penetrate with effortless, force. And it is a full Tang design, so it's got this, I think it's brass grommet or whatever this is, holding the Tang into the rubber handle. So, you don't have to worry about the handle separating from the blade or anything like that with cheaper designs. Cold Steel does not cheap out on the Tang, thankfully. Very appreciative that they do that. And you can see it here next to the Kobun, the Kobun was my favorite blade for a long time, but we finally got the Kobun beat. You can just see the Kobun is a much smaller blade. It's smaller and lighter, right? But the Kobun doesn't have as much handle, right? The handle's not as thick, which for me was not ideal. I enjoy the additional handle. And you can see the Kobun in hand is just a smaller design, right? And the Kobun is a fantastic blade, but it doesn't have the index guard, the handle's not as hefty, and it doesn't have the mass, right? The SRK has mass, and in a defensive situation, that mass means better penetration, more effortless penetration, and more damage on a bad guy if you're using it defensively. So I really love that, and the clip point does make it better for utility, better for wood and fire making, which I do a good amount of too, so I actually don't mind the clip point, even though I love me some Tanto, but I I think this is it. This is, for me, the final knife in my collection. It doesn't get any better than this.